Welcome back to Industry Expert Insight, powered by CounselNavi, where real journey shapes real career clarity. Today, we have Mr. Anand Shiralkar with us. He is a CEO of Rion's Technology and has spent years building technology-led businesses with a strong focus on people, skill, and long-term impact. We are really excited to learn from his journey today. Career clarity versus career noise.
And thank you for inviting me to this podcast series. It's very interesting, and I really like that you're bringing people from different backgrounds, and this definitely would be helpful. Um, I when I met Sagar and Ashish in Japan some time back, when I started listening to their idea, I honestly felt that this is the same problem many people are trying to solve. But when I started talking to them, point by point, I felt like peeling an onion, right? Like each layer revealed some deeper problem, not just about career, but about the confusion. And I also tried to relate it to my kids, or even to people around me. So the confusion, friction, timing. I mean, these are all challenges that we all go through. So this is something very important. So if I have to answer your question, students today are confused not because of the lack of information, right? Like, as you know, they confused because they have too much of it, right? Like, there are so many YouTubers, there are so many great advices, there are so many books to look at, there's so many great people also to get advice from. So when I look at my journey, I always the things always change. So when I was in 12th standard, I wanted to join Navy, merchant Navy, because I thought that could be that could give me a glamorous life. Then I thought okay, when I was doing engineering, I thought I should do MBA and do some business related things. Then I thought okay, I should start some company. So these things, what do I want to become cannot be a fixed thing, right? Like that you have to decide right away, right? Like at 8th, 9th, or even in the first year of engineering. So as I started working, I started reflecting on the things. Things changed for me. I mean, I decided to make my journey based on the experiences that I had. So there is no fixed roadmap, right? Like, so couple of things or a couple of mistakes that I see, and perhaps we could address are right. One is, I see students, or even early professionals, they try to make their or optimize their life too early. So they chase for ranking, titles, salaries. What looks most successful, like on social media, may not be a successful thing in the long run. So not worrying about optimizing your life in the initial stages, right? Like, it's something very important. Now, the second very important part, that I have mistake that I have found is not reaching out to enough people. So what I have seen is, when I decide to do something, if I reach out to the people, who have been doing similar things, would definitely, be of a great help. And one more part that I learned, in a very it's not right. Like, I mean, it took some time for me also to learn is, when you want to do something, take action on it. Don't just consume the information. So I was also when I wanted to start something, I would watch a lot of videos and a lot of other things. But this is something, this small thing, if you could try to change, that could also bring some structure. So again, if I have to summarize, I think just don't look at the noise. Focus on the signals that are coming from your experience, by talking to others, through your network, and don't worry about optimizing your career on day one.
Skills that actually matters in the industry.
Very interesting question, and this also changed over the period of my my work as a founder. And one of the things that I always look at is degrees may open the doors for you, but the skills are more important, and skills will ensure that door stays open. Your right intent will also decide that. So as a founder, or now sometimes as an investor also, I rarely ask someone where they studied, how they studied, how well they studied. Of course, that may right like be in the beginning, but what matters to me the most are again the signals, right? Can this person be trusted? And which is very important thing, right? Like I mean, if I cannot trust anyone, and this is something said by Ankur Waripu also, that if I cannot trust anyone, or if I cannot trust some person, it doesn't matter how smart that person is or how talented that person is. So, first point, like, can this person be trusted? Can this person learn fast? Does it have that aptitude? Can he or she can communicate, right, like that work? Then can he take the ownership? And can he, right, like finish what he starts? And now let me tell you, right, like this also depends on type of the work that we are doing. So if it is related to R&D, you may need to look at different attributes. So if that person is going to join, right, like a support team, perhaps the attributes could be little different as well. But one consistent part, right, like is ability to learn fast, and ability to, right, like I mean, have that integrity, right, like I mean, engraved in themselves. So something that is not taught, right, like in a day or two. It has to be, right, like through the culture, through the podcasts, right, like or listening to the right people, learning from elders. It's something, right, like very required. So again, if I have to give advice, be very practical, right, like in terms of build one skill deeply and try to find out, right, like other skills as well, but ensure that, right, like you are going beyond, right, just going beyond one skill. You should also ensure that you are taking responsibility, ownership. And I really like, right, like one line that Brian Tracy used, and that also, right, like created a big impact on my thought process when I was working at City back then in Japan. So what he told at that time was, when you are working, work as if you are owning that place and not renting that place. So when you have that thought process as if, right, like you're owning that place, you start working differently. So so taking responsibility even when it feels uncomfortable, right, like it's something very important. And projects, internships, real experience matters more than any certificates.
Aligning passion with employability.
So this is again, right, like also very interesting and very good question that you asked. So I remember, right, like one quote, and this was, right, like at one of my relatives, one of my relatives' hall, they had, right, like this quote written, and I still have that, right, like engraved in my mind. So that quote was, doing what you like is freedom, and liking what you do is happiness. So once you start, right, like doing something, and if you start liking it, I mean, that will create, right, like build the happiness. So so many students believe, right, like the passion comes first, but in reality passion is built, is built, not discovered. And again, right, like I'll tell you, so if I have to look at my journey as well, initially in my early days, right, like Java was my passion. Right, like then it became equity research became my passion. Then starting, right, like company, right, like became passion. Now talking to the founders and understanding, right, like interesting parts from them, right, like has become passion. So passion, right, like will keep on changing, but you need to build that, right, like I mean, it should not be something, I mean, you need to work on it as well. So and if you see, right, like the companies also, the localization company that we have, or the platform, was not a passion on day one. It came after, when I saw the impact, customers, value creation. These are the things, right, like will build, right, like your passion, and then will also make, right, like you make that as an identity for you. I would highly recommend to watch or to read, right, like this book called Ikigai, right, which like talks about the passion. And I think this is something, when you're aligning your passion with the employability, this is something very important. What it says that what you are most curious about, like what market values, what becomes, right, like good faster, like where your capabilities are. You need to identify those areas, right, like to bring your unfair advantage, and finding out the overlap of what market is looking for, what you are good at, what you're passionate about. You need to find out that overlap part and focus on that area. So again, right, like this is something, if you're able to identify that, and now that, right, like the information is available, you can talk to a lot of people and find that out. If you're able to, earlier you are able to find that overlap, earlier, right, like you'll be able to see the results. So you know long terms, right, like in my opinion, long term growth, right, like matters much more than just short term impulsive signals, right, like that you would see. So focus again, focus on be interested in it. Once you become interested, automatically you will see the passion.
Preparing for a rapidly changing future.
And so preparing for rapidly changing future, right? Like it's something that we all need to work on. I mean, it's not just students or the early interns, right? Like they need to look at. So what is happening, as you could see, that a lot of things are changing, but the mindset is something, right? Like very important, as you rightly said. The future will not reward fixed job titles. Okay, it will reward people who are adaptable, who are flexible, who could learn quickly. So these are, right, like I mean, things that will matter the most. So of course AI will change the roles, but it will not replace thinking, judgment, context. The most valuable skill going forward is unlearning, and learning to how to learn again, making decisions and understanding systems. Okay, so again, in my opinion, even in the age of AI, the biggest risk is not technology. The biggest risk is rigidity, and so I think it's not, right, like when you're building something, depending on the type of a person. So again, you have to look at, right, like I mean, how that person is as well. So if that person is introvert, he has to right, like I mean, think about learning, right, like other things, right, like he can go deep, right, like on one subject. Whereas if the person is more extrovert, you have to actually have, and this something CounselNavi can provide, right, like a lot of information on as well, I believe. But based on your personality, find out, right, like find out what makes sense, and as we discussed earlier, find out your ikigai, and then connect, right, like those dots to focus on the skills, and just be adaptable, right, like I mean, don't be rigid. If I have to say.
Message to parents, educator, and role of CounselNavi.
So let me address, right, like the first part, and then I will address, right, like how CounselNavi can be useful as well, based on my interaction with Sagar and Ashish. As you rightly said, that so you are introvert person, so you basically interact, right, like on things differently. So something like that, right, like it's something very personal. And if you see, right, like our parents, or in fact, right, like I mean, when I look at my kids, I always want best for my kids, right, like I want and I would like to protect, and I would like to them, and I would like to push my ideas on them. So if I have to, if I have, right, like any suggestions for parents, and again, including me, right, like it's not something that I'm going to give outside. Is give them open canvas, create opportunities for them to understand different, variety of fields that are available, and just let them choose, right, like what they want to do. So don't go with the fixed path, right, like comes to you. So if I have to tell, right, like I mean, my daughter, right, like she initially wanted to become a pilot, then she wanted to become a police officer, then now she wants to be YouTuber, or so there are, right, like she will keep on changing, and just support her, right, like on that part. And something similar to my son as well, right, like so you have to, you cannot give them the fixed path, right, like you need to bring adaptability, right, like the way I have been suggesting, I mean, in within you as well. And parents, right, like as a parents, I should not, I should guide them, but I should not push them that, like, do these things, don't put control, right, like on them. So that's what, right, like I think, it's something very important. For educators, I would suggest something very important, and this is something that I, felt from perhaps my experience so far, that educator's job is to bring that interest in the students. They don't need to, right, like teach them the ideas. If they, like, there is again, right, like one very interesting quote that Give man a fish, you will feed him for the day. uh, Teach him how to fish and you will feed him forever. So educators job is to help them encourage thinking, give them the exposure, allow them to right like come up with reflections, because something which is missing is right like we just get all the information but we spend very less time on the reflection. So this is something right like very important. So for me, like as a parent, I need to be a GPS system, where I should suggest routes to them, but let them decide where they want to go. I'll just right like give them the routes. I'll give them the perhaps a vehicle in the beginning, but let them drive the car, and you just right like be a backseater, right like helping them, supporting them, and especially when they don't want you on the backseat, it's fine, right? Like you can get into the other car as well. So that's what I feel, right? Like about how parents and educators role, especially right like in driving the career. Now, when you come to a platform like CounselNavi, and let me be very frank, right, like with you, I have not gone very deep, right, like in the platform, but based on my interaction, it was quite intense interaction with Sagar and Ashish, who are co-founders, founders of this platform. What I felt that they are trying to solve this problem, right, like in a very structured way, without forcing decisions. And one thing that I like is it's not just they are right like taking their thoughts and they're applying it. They're also interacting with a lot of people, getting the guidance, combining all this data, real world context, and most importantly, they it will reduce anxiety on both sides, right? Like student side as well as parent side, and that could also right like create a long term value. So, and one more thing, and this is something right like I really liked about CounselNavi as well, is that career guidance is not just one time activity. It's a continuous process, right? Like it's a kind of a Kaizen process. So it will continuously evolve, and we just need to be prepared for that. And that's something that I really like about the thought process of Ashish and Sagar. So that's what I have to say about CounselNavi.